Have you heard from lawmakers on the VP's comments? I want to know the reaction on Capitol Hill tonight about ending the filibuster to restore abortion rights. And yes, I'm going to let you start with, what did Joe Manchin say?
Well, Senator Joe Manchin was not thrilled, obviously. He says that he said he was not going to endorse in this race. He's not pleased about Kamala Harris's comments. But guess what? Joe Manchin decided not to run for re-election, and so Joe Manchin won't be in the Senate next year. So it doesn't matter really what Joe Manchin thinks about it at this point. Republicans are obviously beside themselves. Democrats, though, this is something that they have been contemplating and discussing. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said that it is something that he's going to have to consider with the rest of the Democratic caucus, removing aspects of the filibuster for something very specific like voting rights. Has said that that's something he would do. As far as abortion is concerned, that's absolutely on the table. But, Steph, they also have to have a Democratic majority in the Senate, and that is very much up in the air.
Unfortunately, I was so taken by Leanne's living room, I have no idea what she just said. So, Molly, I'm going to ask you to discuss the same thing. But Kamala Harris talked about this on a local Wisconsin radio station. How important are these local interviews on issues like this? And if you want to comment on Manchin, feel free. I can't help you because, gosh, it's like a cream oasis in there.
It really is beautiful.
It really is. It really is.
I get distracted, too. No, look, what she's doing, what the Harris team is doing with these local news stations, doing local stuff, doing doing the Black Journalist Association last week. They're very targeted in the kind of media they're doing, which I think is really smart. Look, there's been a lot of talk about doing a cutout for just reproductive choice. Again, we don't know that they're going to have the Senate numbers, but I think her justification for this would be that it was a right, a constitutionally protected right for nearly half a century. So it's not like just ending the filibuster for something that is, that hadn't existed for a long time as a right of women.
All right, I want to wait to talk about what Donald Trump said today and talk more about where he said it. He was in Georgia for the first time in almost 2 months. Hugo, I know you've got a lot of reporting on his ground game there. Tell us.
Look, the Trump campaign has outsourced virtually all of its ground game to a number of super PACs this cycle, and Georgia is no exception.
What does that mean, right? What does it mean they've outsourced their ground game to super PACs?
So historically what has happened is the RNC would get its pot of money and it would basically farm it out to local and state Republican Party entities, and they would kind of do their own RNC ground game where they would have armies of field operation people, door knockers, canvassers, and then go door to door, and they'd be like, have you made your plan to vote in this election yet? If they haven't, what's your plan? And they would have these voter contests.
Got it. So the RNC didn't do it this time. They were releasing Laura Trump's record. They had legal bills to cover. Different priorities.
Right. And there was this FEC
was releasing
opinion.
a record, at least a single.
I saw the video.
I do not know if it was a full LP, but at the very least, it was a single. That doesn't happen for free.
Right. And the FEC had this opinion that said, the campaign can now coordinate more closely with super PACs because, it allows the campaigns to free up some of the money. So this was the rationale. The problem was they started so late. They really started these super PACs hiring people last month. This is extremely late in the cycle. You're trying to hire people on 2-3 month contracts to go knock on doors in like the blazing heat in kind of Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Like that's not something that you can retain good staff to do, number one. Second of all, when you do it this late in the cycle, you don't get as many voter contacts as you would like. America PAC, Elon Musk's PAC that is leading the ground game operation for Trump in these battleground states, is trying to do 3 passes of these doors between now and Election Day. They are not on track in some states.
Last minute losers?
Too little, too late.
Possibly. All right, Leanne, let's talk about Mitch McConnell, because he said, no surprise, he's not a fan of tariffs after Donald Trump threatened to impose a 200% tariff on John Deere equipment that's manufactured in Mexico. And quick caveat to our audience. You want to destroy a storied American brand and American company? Sure. Jack up tariffs in their face and then make products more expensive for the consumer. So hurt the consumer and hurt one of America's most beloved companies. Besides Mitch McConnell, who very rarely agrees with Trump, but very rarely does anything about it. Have you talked to any other Republicans on the Hill about Trump's big econ ideas?
Well, Steffi probably very rarely agrees with you, too, but that's exactly what you said is what he said today, that it will absolutely raise the cost on American consumers, and it's not something that he supports. There's a lot of Republicans who are extremely uncomfortable with Trump's tariff plan on Capitol Hill, but they say, look, this is campaign politics. People make a lot of promises, and they're back in the mode of, hey, let's cross our fingers and hope this doesn't happen if he gets elected. At this point, they're not willing to speak out very much against it. But if this is in the hands of Republicans in Congress, they are not comfortable with this, even though they have moved a lot in the populist direction. They have moved in the direction of Donald Trump on the economy, but this, for most of them, is too far.
Okay, just to remind our audience, those are Republican lawmakers crossing their fingers and hoping a campaign promise doesn't come to fruition. And that campaign promise is of the Republican candidate, not the Democrat. Donald Trump also promised today that if elected, I want to make sure I get this right, he's going to take jobs from other countries by offering lower taxes and lowering the energy costs to companies here. So they're going to want to manufacture in the United States. Here's what I need to know, Hugo. Does this work with undecided voters? Because if we just stop having taxes, right? If we bring in no tax dollars into this country whatsoever, which is basically every passing day with every goodie that Trump offers, it's like we're no longer going to need an IRS. We're not even collecting taxes. Our country won't run.
Right, and together with the tariff, can we just say, like, if you take all of these protectionist measures together, you actually increase inflation, which is what Trump is saying he's going to reduce and has been blaming Biden for, and now Kamala Harris. But all of these protectionist measures actually increase inflation, they increase the cost of living, and I don't see how this is beneficial for the American consumer. The Trump campaign likes to talk about the American worker, but then, well, the American workers are consumers too, and they're going to be hit in the pocketbook if you continue to have protectionist measures like tariffs and basically giving foreign companies tax breaks to manufacture in the U.S.
Wharton School of Business, how you feeling now? All right, Mark Cuban has gone further today, not just trolling, attacking, fighting with Elon Musk about Kamala Harris policies versus Trump. He actually went as far as to officially endorse the Harris-Walz ticket today. Watch this.
I just want to go through just a few quick statements on why I'm supporting Vice President Harris and why I think she's better for business. In a nutshell, the vice president and her team thinks through her policies. She doesn't just off the top of her head say what she thinks the crowd wants to hear, like the Republican nominee. He says things off the top of his head that tend to often be ridiculous, if not insane.
Ridiculous, if not insane. But is that strategy working?
Well, we don't know, right? I mean, we have polls that
Pollings continue to say that he does better on the economy, despite
right. No, I know that's
16 Nobel laureate economists,
right.
Despite 80 CEOs, despite Donald Trump's policies that he's actually pitching, he got scores of people going, it's pretty good on the economy.
It's vibes. I mean, I don't know, but it's completely crazy. I agree. And he's, every economic policy he's chopped has been like childcare. Remember last week on
childcare is childcare.
Yeah, the man is not, coming up with anything new, and he's usually sort of recycling old stuff. But for whatever reason, I guess there's some kind of, memory of Republicans being good on the economy at one point. But yeah, no, I'm glad that Mark Cuban did that. And it's nice to see that there are some billionaires who don't just care about the 2025 tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts that are going to expire, and they want them to stay.
But that's what's interesting, because Trump kind of has this two-tiered base of super, super wealthy people who don't want a wealth tax, who want to protect their situation, but also his core base, that blue-collar worker. And why they're so interesting is that was his original base, that forgotten American, right? But he didn't remember them. Joe Biden and Joe Biden's policies did deliver for that voter, yet they're staying with Trump. Tomorrow, VP Harris is giving a speech in Pittsburgh on manufacturing. Help us understand what her pitch is going to be, because in the last 4 years, they've actually delivered for that base.
Look, the funny thing about Trump as well is, when he was in office, he used to talk about your 401ks are going up, the S&P is going up, and I'm like, your core constituency base is not looking at the 401k and seeing if it's pegged to the S&P. They're trying to, go through their normal kind of regular consumer issues on the high street. Yeah. And so this has always been the disconnect inside Trump world. He has to placate his, to your point, his ultra-rich donors, but it's also his base. And he's always counting on the fact that his base doesn't quite understand the economic instruments and the economic products that he's pushing that appeal to the rich donors. And that has always been the continuum here. And, it's funny you mentioned about kind of Harris and her policies. And, when she talks about an opportunity economy and when she talks about trying to help a middle class, right, that's the pitch. Not specifically on the manufacturing policy, but what I noticed with the small and medium-sized business policy that Harris has, the moment she put forward her policies on that, Trump had to pivot and say, oh, no, I support the middle class as well. And, I'm going to have the same set of policies that Harris does, because he realized he wasn't being matched on the economy.